Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, part 5 of our season preview series, the debate that Ben and I have been waiting our whole lives to have. What is the best role for Bradley Beal for this year's team? And is that the same thing as what's best for the team this year? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Suns. I'm Brendon, Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Friday. Don't forget, Locked On Suns, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button to become an everydayer on whatever podcast platform you love. And get locked onto the Phoenix Suns each and every day with thousands of other Suns fans right along with you. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by our lovely friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, joining me as always, the executive producer of The Drive on Fox Sports 910 from the wonderful confines of downtown Phoenix, where I'm headed to a Phoenix Mercury game later today. How are we feeling this Friday, Ben Garcia?
Ooh, that's a big Mercury game tonight. The GOAT's potential final home game. All right. You know what? I'm not even going to complain that you're making me have to switch up studios. I got kicked out of the one I'm normally in. I'm in a different one today. You know, listen, I'll cut you some slack. That's a big one. If anything, this one's on me. So I'm stoked, but that's a big one.
Yeah, we'll see. She's keeping quiet. I don't think she knows, if I'm being honest with you, which is part of it. But hey, you got to be there in case it is the last one. All right, let's talk about Bradley Beal. The question we want to ask and answer today as we move through our season preview series, already a week in, part 5 already. What is the best role for Bradley Beal? And that means, I think, starting versus bench, but also like how does he play with this team? And then also, is that answer the same as what's best for the Suns, right? I think there's kind of two wavelengths of this. So let's start with Beal, okay, Ben? I have some numbers for you off the top. 34 games in Bradley Beal's career, he's come off the bench, but he hasn't done it since 2016. Do you want to know the guys that he was on a bench mob with that Washington team?
I don't know if I
can
can
guess
name
one of them.
Was Paul Pierce coming off the bench on that team?
I don't think he had come in yet.
What about
one?
Marcin
Is actually
Gortat?
a Suns has a Suns connection. It's not Marcin Gortat. He was a starter. It's Kelly Oubre.
Oh,
Rookie
that's
Kelly
Oubre.
Yeah,
The original Valley Boy.
Exactly. And then Ramon Sessions and Nene. Those were some of the bench mob guys for Washington.
Goodness.
That's just to show how long it's been, right? But to your credit, you are one of the OG whisperers of this, bringing this to life. This idea of Beal coming off the bench. But to your credit, a lot of people, more and more people around Suns world, around the NBA world, I feel like buying into this. So make the case. What do you think makes sense about at least Mike Budenholzer, the stars of this team, coming together and saying maybe this could be what's best for you and for this group?
Well, you know, it's very interesting. So PHNX's Gerald Bourguet wrote an article about this the other day, and I don't think anyone is, crazy or being, just, uninformed or whatever it comes to. I like Gerald Bourguet. I think he's super smart. Know the guy personally. He's very nice. One of the nicest people I've ever met. But I remember reading in his article, he had put, why would you want to put the unequivocally third best player of the Phoenix Suns on the bench? And when I read that, I thought, because am I going crazy? Am I the only one that watched last year? Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal did not work on the floor together at the same time. We saw what happened. They were all healthy, right? For the final stretch of the season. Everyone was healthy. What happened? They got pushed around, partially because they're not the best defenders. Kevin Durant is still, for some reason, an underrated defender. Devin Booker, I think people are starting to see he's a better defender, but he's still not great, but he's good. He's fine. Bradley Beal is a willing defender. That's not a real recipe for a team that's not going to get pushed around wearing skinny jeans going up against club bouncers. Listen, I love the Bradley Beal thing. I love him as a contributor on this team. I love him as a guy that can score a bunch of points. But it clearly just did not work together last year. It's way too much redundancy. Bradley Beal does too much of what Kevin Durant and what Devin Booker already do. And I don't want to continue to add more to that. I don't want to have to find another way to get Bradley Beal the ball when I already have two volume scorers who can do it anyways. So that's just where I'm at with it. It's just too much redundancy. I really wish that they had a real traditional point guard whose job it was just to get the ball to Kevin Durant and to Devin Booker. I'm not arguing Bradley Beal isn't the third best player on the Phoenix Suns. Manu Ginobili was probably the third best player on that Spurs team. He came off the bench. And then there was another part in that article that was, why would you want to put someone who makes $50 million a year on the bench? I don't know how many times I have to say this. And again, ton of respect for Gerald. It's okay to disagree. I don't care how much money Bradley Beal makes. I'm not counting his pocket. We're not even having this conversation if Bradley Beal makes $18 million a year. I am looking for what puts the players in the best position to succeed. Bradley Beal, if he could just worry about getting buckets and not changing his entire style of play while still closing games and while still playing 30-plus minutes a night, that is the best version of Bradley Beal. And I'm going to continue to champion that, even though I know it's not going to happen right away.
And yes, we do disagree, right? So let's just get that out of the way. I'm on the other side of this. And let's talk about the money part of it too, because just to address that elephant in the room or whatever, because that's one of the things that I first bristled at as well. But it's not because I think that if you have a highly paid player, you're quote unquote wasting him if he's on the bench. To me, that side of it is less knowable for us. And the thing about the money is I think it's just hard from a pride standpoint and even like convincing Matt Ishbia of it, frankly, standpoint, because of the investment that they're making in him. But I don't think there's anything wrong with putting a player who just so happens to make a lot of money in a lesser role. That's just called contracts aging. We see that all the time. There's plenty of players as they move through their career, their contract is one thing, their current status is another. I don't personally have a problem with that that's wasting him or anything. But hey, you go be the guy to have that conversation. That's easier said than done. Mike Budenholzer has a big task ahead of him if they ever put this to Beal, because Beal's contract represents all that he's done in the league. And that's sort of where I think that discrepancy can come. But here's another part of it. I just don't want to fast forward to the idea that putting Bradley Beal on the bench is inherently going to maximize him. That feels a little bit like it feels too big of an assumption for me to make. We just assume, hey, too many cooks in the kitchen. Let's have Beal play with Monte Morris or Grayson Allen or whatever it might be for him. And let's have the best dominant guys on this team, the clear-cut numbers 1 and 2, who we debated about a little bit on Thursday's show, play with Tyus Jones and a real center. And that's just, okay, check, check, check. That's better. I'm not convinced of that. When all three of the big three were on the court last year, you know I love net ratings and offensive ratings, Ben. I got another one for you. They were +3 per 100 possessions. They outscored teams. As I've repeated that stat, I think multiple times already this week, good but not great, not good enough in my opinion. That's a conversation for a different day. But the number that is important here is when Beal was on by himself and Book and Durant were off, which is probably some more minutes that he would be put into position to play this year if he's coming off the bench, even if you're mixing and matching and staggering everybody. You're probably still going to have more minutes with that being the case of Beal being the only of the big three on the court. They had a 110 offensive rating, which would be dead last in the NBA, basically, and a negative net rating. Now, of course, you're going to say, what about Drew Eubanks? What about all these nobodies that were playing with him? And that is fair. But I'm not ready to just say, put Beal, let him cook, so to speak, and then everything will be better.
I don't know if everything will just be better, but they have to try something different. And here's why at the beginning of the season, I'm not going to go berserk and say, why isn't Bradley Beal on the bench? I'm going to give Mike Budenholzer a chance to figure it out, because he might. He is the offensive guru if you line him up with Frank Vogel. And I'm totally okay with that. I want people to understand that I'm trying to be as civil and as rational about this issue as I possibly can, while also understanding it's now or never for the Phoenix Suns if this is going to work. So I'm totally okay with letting Budenholzer figure it out for 25 games, 30 games.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very patient with the Suns for the first quarter of the season. I don't know if fans will be too. Fan is short for fanatic. They emote. They get emotional. They're hyper vocal. I get that. But if we see the same issues through 25 games, I'm going to start championing the what are we doing, guys? Let's not keep doing the same thing over and over again. That's where I'm at.
And you've been high on Beal all week, so I think this was the right time to do this episode because
That's my guy.
We both feel good that Bradley Beal is going to have a better season, and that there's better ways for him to impact the game and this team night to night than he did last year. So let's talk about what those first 20-25 games need to look like so we avoid this altogether, right? What's the best for the Suns of how this could look? And does it have to be that he goes to the bench? We'll get into all of that coming up next. First, today's show is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the best sports book ever. And of course, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. You've heard us talk a ton about them, but we have something a little different for you right now. Through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. We talked about it on Thursday's show. KD and Book astronomically undervalued in the MVP race when you have somebody like Victor Wembanyama doubling them up in the odds when you just consider what the standings are going to look like. So maybe that's a fun one. Maybe you go Cardinals on Sunday. Maybe you go D-backs a little bit. Whatever you like. Visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook, and take advantage of that offer. All right, Ben is done rolling around the studio. We are back here from our lovely friends at FanDuel, and we are going to talk about what the best outcome for this team is in terms of Beal. Because can we agree on this, Ben? The best possible solution, or whatever you want to call it, for Beal fitting in with this big three and fitting in with this Suns team is that they just figure it out together and are better than the sum of their parts and better as a trio than they were last year. You got the three guys on the team. They kind of just have to do it at a higher level together than they did, no matter what the path to getting there is.
Yeah, and just the reason why I was rolling around the studio is because my headphones are about to die. So if for some odd reason I just start talking and looking for something else, that is why. So bear with me. You know,
blame Diana Taurasi. Blame Diana Taurasi.
I'll blame Diana
for the
Taurasi.
technical difficulties today.
Exactly. But no, so the Bradley Beal thing, at least when you come to like what's best for the team, is this aligned basically with what the Suns want to do? Again, I'm not going to champion the Bradley Beal to the bench thing until a little bit later on the season. I'm going to give it a chance. I'm not worried about Bradley Beal. This is what I need to see from him. I need to see from him the same thing that I saw last year, right? Willingly taking the third spot on a team. Willing to just let your stats go down, be the one who takes really all the blame, because that's what happens. Chris Bosh got way too much blame for when the Miami Heat failed. Once and then twice again in LeBron's last year with the Heatles. Kevin Love got way too much blame. That's just what happens. The third wheel, for some reason, always gets the most blame. Is he willing to take that? Have the humility to not get as many shots, which he did last year. So I'm not too worried about that. The biggest thing for Bradley Beal is I need him to embrace being the de facto point guard when Tyus Jones isn't on the court. He still has to get better at playmaking. Tyus Jones, I'm not so sure he's going to close out a ton of games, like every single game. There's going to be times where the Suns are going to be down 5+ points, and just from Budenholzer's system, that's going to make Bradley Beal likely the de facto point guard. Because if you're rolling out a lineup Tyus Jones, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Yusuf Nurkic to end games. Man, you are deathly small. So in order to match up with other teams, you're going to have to insert a Royce O'Neal in that. Maybe Ryan Dunn figures it out. He's a guy you'll have to insert in that. You can't start all these guys. And if everyone's making the argument with me, you're not sending the $50 million guy on the bench, which I agree with in this aspect. Bradley Beal's got to become a better playmaker. He was getting better at it towards the end of the year and then completely flamed out in the playoffs. I have to see improvement in that area where Bradley Beal is able to be the not just backup point guard, but the guy that is a very competent guard who knows his job is to attack the rim, apply pressure, and kick the ball out to Devin Booker and Kevin Durant in open jumpers and get the bleep out of the way. And I've seen him do half of that. I've got to see him be the best point guard he can be in the closing minutes of games or in high leverage situations.
I think that's fair. I like the point you made about Bud's system for a few reasons. One, because Beal, okay, let's go back. The closest comp that I think I have for maybe what the point guard's function will be this year under Bud in Phoenix is actually Jeff Teague in Atlanta. More so than Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday is kind of a weird player. He likes to bomb on these pull-up threes. Giannis handled the ball a lot. I think it's going to be more of Jeff Teague. And what did he do? He basically walked the ball up the court, ran the ball up the court, entry pass to initiate whatever it was that they were going to be playing, and then basically spot up. It was a pretty low usage point guard role. It wasn't somebody like, a Chris Paul who's orchestrating and having his hands all over every single possession. It was really the kind of like high school definition of a point guard, really just setting the table for whatever was going to come next and kind of getting out of the way. And so I think there will be times when Beal does that, but I also think there's going to be a lot of times when Beal is maybe in that Kyle Korver role, maybe in some of the stuff that we saw Bud draw up for somebody like Chris Middleton. I think that we talk about how many versions and iterations of this team there might be, and I kind of think Bud will have an answer for all of them. It's just going to be up to the guys on the court in that moment to embrace whatever their role is within that unit. That's a very difficult task, but you're absolutely right to say that no matter if Beal's coming off the bench or starting or what any of these guys kind of like position is whenever their names are read off at the starting lineup before tip-off, they're all going to have to be comfortable changing that minute to minute. But here's my thing with Beal, and I'll say it again. I've said it a bunch of times. We underrate the season that he had last year. He had the most efficient year of his career. His usage went down. He had the best statistical defensive season since the last time he was an all-star, the year the Suns made the finals. He changed his shot diet considerably. He went up in terms of three-point frequency, down in terms of mid-range frequency, so traded some of those less efficient jumpers for more efficient jumpers. He did a little bit of that point guard stuff. He defended guys who were bigger than him and who had more offensive talent than maybe he was used to, and maybe even since that, Ramon Sessions Nene team that I was quizzing you on before. And so part of why I'm so optimistic that they can just sort of roll it back and put Tyus in there is we already saw Beal take significant steps toward adjusting to the type of role we know he's going to ultimately have to fill, whether he's starting, closing, or whatever. Let him keep figuring it out. That's my thing.
I think it's still an adjustment for Bradley Beal to go from an all-star and a 30-plus point a game guy to man, this sounds bad, but I'm just going to be honest with you. A Kentavious Caldwell-Pope role, a Bruce Brown role, or a Derek White role. Now, he's never going to be Derek White defensively. That is just insanity to ask that. This team's going to go as far as Kevin Durant and Devin Booker take them. I believe that wholeheartedly, and that's exactly what's going to happen. But this team needs an X factor. And I think the X factor of this team is Bradley Beal. If Bradley Beal is willing to be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and shoot 38% from three. Now, he shot 43% from three last year. Granted, 34-game sample size, got hot in some moments. Let's just, call it what it is. Probably closer to 37%. If you could shoot 38% from three this year, Be willing to be just the willing defender and just a vocal leader on a team who just wants to win. That is what's going to separate the Suns apart from other teams. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving of the Mavericks, awesome. I'd take Bradley Beal in a nutshell over their third best guy or the Lakers' third best guy, Austin Reeves or Bradley. I'd rather have Bradley Beal. I know people are down on him. He is going to be asked, and I believe he's going to do so. Bradley Beal doesn't have the personality of someone that just cares about himself. He just really doesn't, and I feel like he showed that a ton last year. Bradley Beal has to be willing to be that guy. Bruce Brown was the X factor in that Nuggets championship run. Derek White was that X factor in that championship run. And watch the Nuggets not be the same this year without Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. No one is going to be asked on this team to change more about what they do than Bradley Beal. It's why I say he should go to the bench and no one else. Because I think not only can he do it, I think he'd be willing to do it. Now it's going to be a hard conversation. For some reason, these guys have egos, and having your name said at the beginning of the game by Vince Marotta, I guess, is just a big deal to some people, but I guess not to me. I can't believe at times there is such an uproar about asking Bradley Beal to do something different than he's used to doing, because newsflash, he's going to be asked to change his game the most. I believe he will do it. And if the Suns want to be separated apart from other teams, you got to do something different, and you got to have an X factor, and that's going to be Bradley Beal. And that's really where I stand on that. And I believe that is also, in just 1,000%, the parallel interest to the team of the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. You mentioned KCP as a comp. I have some other ones. Let's walk through some of maybe how we should reshift how we think about Beal and what he's going to be asked to do and why, the scoring, all of it, how that can combine. And we'll touch a little bit on the unfortunate buzzword that we've talked about a little bit already, which is the contract, coming up next. All right, let's close it out, Ben. So you mentioned KCP. That came to mind for me 1,000% when I was trying to think of, like, let's reshift the way we pigeonhole Bradley Beal. Let's stop to the point you made at the beginning. Why would you put a $50 million player on the bench? Don't think of him that way. Stop making yourself attach that to him, because, frankly, as we've discussed throughout this whole episode, the ideal role for him on this team is not somebody who makes that much money, right? It just isn't. Derek White doesn't make $50 million. Very, very, very good player, but doesn't. KCP just got a big bag from Orlando. Wasn't $50 million. He's not an all-NBA player. The Wizards made a mistake. That doesn't have to be part of how we analyze the guy. But the other ones that I thought of are the two that I've kind of tried to keep in mind as we've talked about Beal ever since he got here, which are Klay Thompson and Ray Allen. Parts of big threes that had to adjust and did. And I would even throw out that I think the name most associated with Beal right now is Zach LaVine. So there's all these places you could look to line him up. To me, there is nothing wrong with asking him to be something closer to a KCP or a, let's even say Miami Heat Ray Allen or whatever you want to say, let alone Celtics or before that. And then having the upside that he still can go for 40. There's still going to be games like that last week of the season when he's joking on the broadcast about how he's going to put the team on his back and get him to the playoffs. And he does it. But you don't want to ask him to do that every night because you don't need him to do that every night. So I think it's just going to be up to fans to kind of shift how they evaluate and what the expectations are for Beal and allow him to settle into the role that's going to be best for him and the team, frankly.
You absolutely said it best. Suns fans act like, and it's not just Suns fans, man. It's Suns media. He makes $50 million a year. We got to treat him like it. That's stupid. Sometimes you just overpay for things. Sometimes you get a bad deal on something. I don't try to get a more bang for my buck on my beater of a car that I spent $10,000 on. I don't try to drive it to California because it makes me feel better. I use it within the confines that it's asked to be used. Bradley Beal is not a $50 million player. Look at Bradley Beal as if he was on the free agency market now. What would he get? I'd argue potentially less than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope because he's seen as a star. You got to find a different role for him. He's had injury concerns. I'd argue
You'd probably
that.
get stuck in like the zone that Brandon Ingram's in now, where it's like you got to
People
pay
want
him, but what do you do?
Exactly. What's his worth? That's a great comparison. He'd be exactly in the area of Brandon Ingram. If Bradley Beal was healthy and the Suns were in the same area as Brandon Ingram, they were trying to find a trade partner for him, they'd be stuck in limbo as well. I think it's crazy just to say, because I spent this much, he has to do this. Nope. The Wizards just made a mistake. And
you didn't give him that contract, right? So that's the other silly part of it.
Also, why is he going to make less money if he goes to the bench? He's going to make the same amount. Bradley, people makes $50 million a year. Yeah, he's going to make that anyways, no matter what. You might as well get the best bang for your buck.
He was making $50 million when he was hurt the beginning of the year. He was doing nothing, still making $50 million. That's just, it's not part of it anymore.
Also, could playing less minutes and not a ton, he's still going to play 30 minutes a night, maybe ease his injury concerns that he has? Wouldn't you rather put him in a position where he can succeed at the best ability he can as just a premier scorer and a secondary point guard than anything else? You know, look at Malik Monk. I think that's an even better comparison. I got this idea of Bradley Beal going to the bench when the Suns beat the Sacramento Kings, but Malik Monk went off. And it hit me. I was like, wait a second. That's Bradley Beal. That's Bradley Beal's role. That's what the Suns should be having Bradley Beal do. And I brought it on the air the next day. Me and the main host of the show, The Drive with Jody Ayler, we argued about it. And it was I thought, a fair point. And then this narrative kind of grew. If Bradley Beal could be in the Malik Monk role, and the Suns had a guy that could also people act like Devin Booker's not going to sprain an ankle, or Tyus Jones isn't going to, I don't know, sprain an MCL for 3 weeks. Yeah. Bradley Beal's still going to start games. I just want to put him in the best position to succeed when the Suns are going to be in high leverage games, in playoff games, and I can assure you there might be even a playoff game or two he starts. In a team that's a little bit smaller, they might match up well. I think it's crazy to me that Suns fans and Suns media members act like they're playing Bradley Beal. The only person this should hurt is Matt Ishbia. That's it. That's the only guy, the guy who's signing the checks.
Yeah.
Not me.
As I said, it'd be interesting to hear his reaction to all of this, right? That'd be
let's get him on.
Part of it let's ask him. Okay, to tie bow on the contract thing, you basically made the point I wanted to hammer home as well, which is right now we think of him, his deal is maybe the worst one in the whole NBA. I will just say
I'd say second.
Who's worse?
Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine's worse.
I think Karl Anthony Towns doesn't get talked about enough in that vein, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think he's healthier, and because he's a big man, you can kind of pass it off, and they've had playoff success, obviously, last season, but he's in the mix for me too. But let's say, okay?
That's fine.
That's how people talk about it, is my point. I don't necessarily know if I would even agree. I've never really thought about it in those terms, but I will just say now, we won't think of it that way by the end of the season. One, because it'll be 1 year shorter on left, so that helps. But yes, there's a no trade clause. That's a big part of this. I think the best thing to do to make yourself more tradable, to make yourself have more value, is just to play well. And I think we will think about this less if that happens. I have one last question for you, though, before we wrap up. This can be the last thing we hit. You talked about giving it time. We talked about what might be different come playoff time, or do you have to reevaluate the strategy of what this role looks like? How would you, if you're Mike Budenholzer, you're James Jones, you're this brain trust, how would you navigate if you know that's in the back of your mind as a lever you might need to pull if things don't gel October, November leading up to Christmas? That could be a case to just go ahead and do it from right off the bat rather than it looming and lingering. Or if you know by playoff time, we probably just need to have Beal back in that starting lineup. or have him playing the most? Do we just say it's off limits permanently? I guess just walk me through what you think of the kind of timing and the balance of all of that, because that's a big part of it.
Yeah, the biggest thing is I don't think it'd be fair to me to come on here and just say immediately send him to the bench. I want to give Coach Budenholzer 20 games, probably just 20 games to figure it out. I want to urge every Suns fan to understand the beginning of the season, I do believe, is going to be rough. It's going to be 8-8, 10-8, somewhere around there. People are going to get upset. And I know even in this moment, I'm telling myself to calm down, but when they're 8-10 and they're figuring things out, even I'm going to be upset. So I'm going to have to look back at this later on. So future Ben, relax. I want the Suns to be able to do whatever Coach Budenholzer wants to do at the beginning of the season. I'm not Coach Budenholzer. I didn't win an NBA Finals, so I have to be able to give that up and have the humility to say, I just want him to do what he wants to do first. But if there is a major strain on this team and they have the same issues they did last year, in the fourth quarter, they can't figure out who's going to be the guy, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, or whatever it is. They just can't figure that stuff out. Then at that point, you got to make the move. You got to do something. And you got to do it not towards the middle of the season. Give it 20 games. Everyone's healthy. And if they're not healthy, then you're just going to have to stick with it the entire way through. You're just going to have to stick with the Bradley Beal and whatever Mike Budenholzer wants to do lineup.
Yeah.
But if it's not working, and they're still confused who the number one guy and the number two guy and the number three guy is, and in the and Bradley Beal in the fourth quarter is doing things that we don't know what he's doing, or they're getting pushed around defensively because teams saw that if you have a big man, you can expose this team, like Rudy Gobert, who's literally bad in every playoff series except the one he played with the Phoenix Suns because we had a clear deficiency there. That's when I believe you have to make the call. I don't think you should do it right away because, again, just broken record, let Bud do what Bud's going to do. And I am just optimistic that Bud has just a better idea than I do. But my thing is just if emergency, break glass. And if they would have had Frank Vogel, still I would have said, yes, do that. Bring Bradley Beal off the bench because it didn't work. I think it's just important to give him a fair shake. And the NBA season is so long. If they have the last 60 games to figure out Bradley Beal coming off the bench, I think it would just work out. And like, just as my last calling card, Klay Thompson's a 4-time champion. He came off the bench. Manu Ginobili came off the bench. Really good players come off the bench all the time. I'm just saying, and those guys made a lot of money. It's okay. Humility is a great skill to have. And I just think that that'd be great for Bradley Beal. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see what happens. I'm sure the reaction to this podcast is going to be very civil in the comments section. I would like to say that I am the champion of this civil war. I'm leading the Bradley Beal on the bench squad, and you're on the other side, and it's just a full-on civil war. But yes, I have appreciated the Locked On Suns fans already adding me in columns and things, telling me how crazy I am because I want this to happen.
No matter where it goes or how it goes, I think that it's good that we ended with Bud. He has a big task on his hands to either pull it off, to make them all fit, and have the starting lineup stay intact, put Beal in a position to succeed if he does come off the bench, and communicate this whole plan to everybody and actually get that buy-in. So that's why you pay up and get a legendary coach to come in the building, and he has his work cut out for him. That'll wrap us up for the week, the first week of daily shows, the first week of season preview content. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back next week answering 5 more questions as we preview the upcoming Suns season. That'll take us right to Suns Media Day. Enjoy your weekend. We'll catch you next week.